Welcome to Careers in Discovery, where you'll meet scientists who've forged outstanding careers in biotech and hear about what they've learned along the way. This podcast is brought to you by Singular, building brilliant biotechs. Leigh Brody is an entrepreneur, executive, and now venture investor at AlbionVC, where she oversees the UCL Technology Fund. Leigh joined us to talk about her career, the difference between a good idea and an investable one, and why you must always patent your ideas. This week, I'm delighted to be joined all the way from California by Leigh Brody of AlbionVC. Leigh, welcome to Careers in Discovery, and thank you for joining us so early.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, great to see you. So, Leigh, we're going to start by talking a little bit about Albion and the UCL Technology Fund that you run and the work that you're doing currently. Tell us all about that. Tell us about what you're up to.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So I am based in London, even though I'm in California today. Albion is a London-based fund. So I live there happily. Nice office in Farringdon. So Albion has been around for about 20 years. It's almost about $1 billion under management right now, and it has a number of different funds that sit within it. One of them is UCL Technology Fund, which is the fund I sit on. So I'll go into that. Albion mostly is made up of VCT funds, so they invest in tech, B2B SaaS, fintech, digital health, kind of across the UK.
Yes.
Early seed A, Series A. And then the UCL Technology Fund is the fund I work on. And so there's a team of physical science side investors, just 3 of us, 2 people on the physical science side and 2 partners. So small group, and we work on just UCL.
Okay.
We're on our second fund, about 70 million, and we invest in really exciting technologies that are coming out of the university. And this spans from an idea in a postdoc's head that's like, okay, I think I like this target. Let's put a few experiments together and see if this is interesting.
Right.
And we'll kind of foster that all the way to potentially licensing it out to a company or spinning it out to its own entity.
Yeah, I see. So you get involved quite a bit earlier than a lot of VCs.
Very early.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we sit around and talk about the data. We talk about a potential target or a device or technology that sounds like a cool idea. Sometimes it's a bit more matured in some groups. Sometimes it's really early. And that's the exciting bit, because you kind of walk in and say, okay, what are you thinking about? And we go from there.
Yeah, no, that is exciting. We'll come on to your background, but of course you've got a background as a scientist in genomics and in kind of biotech digital health as well. So I suppose you're coming at this from a scientific point of view as much as an investor's perspective. And we'll talk a bit more about that. But I'm always, whenever I speak to people who are doing similar work to you, Leigh, I always like to talk a little bit about the reality of VC and working in investment, because I think there are misconceptions about what this job actually entails. So I know it's something you've been in and out of for some time as well. So tell us a bit about your day to day, how you spend your time. You've touched on it there, working with the university, but just tell us about kind of the key elements.
Yeah, I mean, I think VC is one of these really, I think it's a really fantastic and exciting position, because it gives you such a diversity of day-to-day and, long-term, short-term projects that you work on. So the way our days are divided, we're partnered with UCL Business. So we'll spend a day a week at UCL. So we work with the UCL Business team and talk about what IP is coming through, what kind of tech transfer activities that are happening. Catch up about projects that we have going on. And we have our project managers kind of seated within UCL Business. So it's a really great kind of bridge there that we have. So we spend a portion of our time in our day talking to academics. And a lot of this is introducing the fund and how we work. Some of it is, let's talk about an idea you have. And is this something that, one, does it make sense for venture capital? Because there's a lot of different shapes and sizes that funding can come in.
Absolutely.
And, VC money is not like grant money, right? There's different strings attached to that and different quantums that are required to get a project to a certain inflection point. So we talk about that a lot of, is this a good idea? One, is this a really good academic idea that can be translated into a product
Right.
which are two different things. And, what
Yes.
are the experiments that you need to get there? And is this something that we can afford? Because one, misconception is like, oh, you're VC, you have a lot of money. It's like, well, we have a certain amount of funds that we do have, to
Yes.
put into this, but it has to be in a really, really specific, um, kind of intersection of a lot of different
Mm,
things. Can we invest in this kind of project to get to an inflection point to either license it out or spin out a company, or even have a signal on whether or not this is going to work or not?
yes.
So there's a lot of these kind of conversations we're having with academics about, um, potential funding of a project, or even current. We might invest a little bit of money here, and then we
Hmm.
think, okay, the data looks good. Let's think about next steps and what does that look like.
Yeah.
And keeping in mind how the market shifts around us, the competitive landscape, excuse me, the macroeconomic
Hmm.
climate of it, how much money we have as a fund have spent, and
Right.
how are we tracking, and what exciting things have come out that another group is doing that might be competitive to it. So kind of taking those points into
Mm,
consideration. So a portion of our time is spent talking to academics about this and kind of teaching them about it, and also kind of bringing them along this journey with us so that they want to work with us as well. So that's a big
hmm.
part of it. And to make sure that the academics are making all the right moves in the sense of talking to their tech transfer office, making
Yes.
sure the right IP is filed, and nobody is sharing this information at a conference before patenting it, because this is a huge thing we run
Yes.
into where
I'm
we talk about
sure.
disclosures and they're like, well, I put it on 2 posters and presented at one conference. It's like, okay, well, that is disclosure. So we
Yeah.
cannot
Yeah.
patent this. Therefore, we can't invest in it. Um, not that we can invest, but it makes it more challenging.
Yeah. Of course.
Um, and then, talking about what the right experiments are, and kind of balancing that out with what the academics' needs are. How many
Hmm.
people on their team? How do we keep everyone happy and afloat and kind of included? What facilities are there? What do they need? Um, and so that's a big part of the academic interaction side. We give talks in the university and,
Mm,
do as much reach out as possible.
yeah.
And then the other kind of piece of my day is managing the portfolio. And so that means, managing the current investments that we have, meeting with the team, looking through the data, making sure things are on track. The project is going accordingly. Do we need to make any decisions on things? Do I need to sign off on any docs to make sure I'm
Hmm.
not holding anyone back? Um, and, generally mapping out what's happening. And some of this includes talking to external companies, biotech, pharma, and saying, here's what I have working. We're working up this really great project. Do you want to be a part of this?
Yes.
And so we're constantly reaching out and thinking what's downstream of this, and, kind of building up that network as well. And at the same time, kind of feeding that back to the team of saying, okay, this company X is really interested.
Hmm.
They want to see these data readouts or inflection points met. So, how can we kind of package that in? Do we have that in the plan already? Do we need to build that in? What do we need to do to get there?
Yes.
Because ultimately, the objective is to kind of get these technologies or treatments into the clinic, into patients, and to help lives.
Right.
So how do we do that?
Hmm.
And so that's part of it. Then, there is the other kind of part of just general diligence of the
Hmm.
field. So trying to carve out a couple hours a day to read science papers, to go to talks, to go to events, and to make sure that you're staying up to date with what's happening in the field.
Yes.
Um, so that's also something that you kind of earmark time for and do as much as you can. And
It's
there's
difficult though, right?
obviously, post COVID, everything is kind of coming back online. So it's
It
kind of
is.
finding that juggle.
Yeah.
Um, and also writing investment papers. The diligence that we work up in the background takes a while.
Hmm.
So modeling out the financial part of it, putting together the data packages to make sure that makes sense. Talking to any experts that we need to talk to, just to kind of, use as a sounding board or reference to make sure that, someone external, fresh eyes, has the same, outlook as us. Um, so yeah, I'd say that's usually my days, are some sort of combination of all of those.
There's plenty going on.
Yeah.
Several things that I'd like to ask more about there.
Yeah.
The first thing is more of a comment, though, and it's something you touched on earlier. Is that I think you're absolutely right. I think people see the sort of headline numbers of this fund of this size, and they think, "Oh, wow, that's loads of money. They can afford to do everything." But then, first of all, this is an expensive business, right? And secondly, if you're going
Hmm.
to then invest and support in 10, 20, maybe more ideas, that money can be spent very quickly if you're not careful with it, right?
It
So,
can go fast. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I think that's one of the really privileged position we're in
Mm,
because UCL has such fantastic work coming out of it, um, and thoughts in people's heads. And, it is, you talk to some VC people and they talk about deal flow, which
yes.
means how many deals are coming to them and what the rate and the quality is. I mean, for us, our deal flow is the easiest part of our job because
Mm,
there's so much fantastic work happening that it's more a function of, okay, we need to, everything is coming at us. So we need to really kind of be as quick as we can on the diligence,
yes.
and also understand what our metrics are and what we're interested in and what makes sense for us as a fund to invest in, and keeping tabs on what the market is looking for. And right, how do we use this pool of money the most efficient as we can?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And kind of leading on from that, and I suppose I'm thinking about this from the point of view of maybe someone sat listening to this who is an academic, whether they're at UCL or somewhere else, and maybe they've got an idea and maybe they've been working on
Hmm.
it as part of their postdoc, as you said, or as a PhD or whatever.
Hmm.
When you're going in and talking to people about these ideas, and when you're looking at this idea of sort of translating from the idea to a potential business and the
Hmm.
viability of that, what are the things that you look for, and what are the things that kind of are signals to you that something's got potential, or what things should the person with the idea be looking at? Is there any guidance you can give around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think first I always tell people I mean, any idea you have, patent it.
Hmm.
Talk to your tech transfer office and patent it first
Yeah.
before
Okay.
talking to anyone. I think that is the number one thing to just remind people, even though everyone says, yeah, 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 like everyone has heard it before, but until you kind of go through the mechanics of how to file
Right.
patents and do all the paperwork to make sure you own your idea and there is some sort of ring fencing around what you're thinking, I think that's a really important exercise to go through.
Hmm.
um, Second, I think if anyone has a good idea, they should absolutely reach out and talk to venture because, there's this kind of misconception that there's a big firewall between academics and, VC. And I completely disagree with that. I think the opposite. I mean, I think
Right.
these conversations should be happening all the time.
Yeah.
And that is also how that kind of journey gets mapped out from going to an academic idea to a product. Because what we think about is, okay, yes, it's a really good academic idea, but then how does that fit into the market? Is there
Hmm.
is it is this a let's take if someone has a target in mind or a particular modality in mind that they want to think about, we say, okay, one, how does it work?
Yeah.
Is it competitive with what other people are doing? What's the patient population like? Is this indication something that this population really needs? Is this a disease that's managed already pretty well?
Hmm.
Or is there really an unmet need here? And what does that look like? And how does it fit into the entire ecosystem? And while that's something that venture people do, that's something that academics can keep in mind, or anyone
Yes.
who comes up with an
Yes.
idea, about why people might say no to that idea, or what can make your product more competitive to what's already out there.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and then the kinds of experiments you need to execute to validate your tech. There's this line people use is, fail fast, right? Do the
Hmm.
hard experiments first that are going to give you a yes, no answer.
Right.
And what does that look like? Make sure you're doing the right in vitro experiments to validate your cell system, at an in vitro level. Make sure you have the right animal models for your in vivo model. What does the regulatory path look like? What does the clinical trials look like? Has a product like this been approved before?
Right.
And there is a roadmap for it, or is this a new system, which is just going to be a little more challenging?
Hmm.
Um, and then, how many, and then the other side of it is what the VC look at are the economics around it.
Right.
Is there a similar drug, treatment, tech, whatever on the market that they can use as a benchmark for what, this might pay back as. And while that's not the academic or inventors, you know, kind of domain, that's
Yes.
something that the VC people are going to be doing in the background. And so something they might hear back of, do you know how many people have this disease? And then they can go ahead and kind of model it out separately. But I mean, always go for it. I mean, we are living in such an exciting time, across the space of, cell and gene therapy, of small molecules, antibodies. We have tests to, really investigate things about the human body and that we hadn't had before. You can sequence the genome basically for free now. While we don't know how to interpret everything, we can measure a lot.
Right.
And so, we're in such an exciting time in life science. So if anyone listening to an idea, listening to this and have an idea, then, go for it, because there's a lot of VC money out there. And the one thing about VCs too, is that while we always look at ideas early as in, I have an idea, let's try it. But I'm having other venture funds come to me and say, we want to go earlier. What do you have? What can we work together on? How can we syndicate? Which means two funds putting money together, into one project. So we have a lot of people coming to us saying, we want to go earlier. What are you looking at? And so I think the appetite to go early has improved, let's say, in years. And so, I think the opportunity is it's a perfect opportunity time to basically talk to VCs about ideas really the early stages.
Yeah, and I think it seems like there's more appetite for earlier ideas, kind of touching on what you were talking about there, because I suppose it's a smaller investment than if something's in the clinic, and it's you can have a little bit more influence, you can shape the company a little bit more perhaps, and advise them and support them more than if there's already 100 people and a leadership team in place and all that kind of stuff. And I guess where the markets become tighter in some places, there seems to still be plenty of money around for early rounds and early stage ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other point to that as well is that there's a few things that have kind of gone down over time, and one of them is R&D spend in pharma companies, and they're acquiring assets now. So there's a big machine out there, further down the roadmap for larger entities to acquire smaller entities. And so I think that sets a good platform for kind of spinning out companies as well, with, an objective to be acquired, basically.
Yeah.
And so, there is like an ecosystem that's kind of shaped around this already. And so for us, spinning out companies, while, the management team can decide and the board can decide what they want to do, of course. But, that there is a system that is in place now. And so, kind of think the risk of spinouts of, you either have to go IPO or nothing, doesn't exist anymore.
No, absolutely. And this is something I would suspect you have an opinion on, but you may not. It's just something I've been having a lot of conversations about recently, is that I suppose by the nature of the technologies that you come across, they're academic spinouts, right? And I think the challenge that we see some academic spin-out companies facing is that a lot of the people who are involved in the founding team haven't worked in a company before, let alone run one or built one. And they, some of them will bring in expertise from people who have, and some of them won't. But the people, of course, we always hear this, the people who are involved in a company are at least as important as the idea, and it's got to be the right execution and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So do you have an opinion on this around of course you can learn to run a company on the fly, but do you have an opinion about sort of bringing in experience early on, or anything like that at all?
Well, you're touching on a few different things, because I've paged through this journey myself, and
Yes, I'm sure.
I think it can be a good segue. I think I'll talk on the tech fund side, and then I'll talk on the personal side first. On the tech fund side, you're right. I mean, academics do not get trained how to be company operators or founders at any point along the journey. And they don't have to. That's not what they should be doing with their time. And so when we want to spin out a company with some fantastic academic founders, we will bring in kind of management experts to help with that.
Right. Yeah.
And that is to, bolster the team with different skill sets and who have done this before.
Mhm.
And while it's always a gradient, right? Some academic founders are really interested in how to run a
Yeah.
company. They
Yeah.
want to get involved in the company. They are quick to learn. And then some are like, I don't know how it works and I don't care. I'm going to show up to the scientific talks. Otherwise, like, please don't waste my time.
Mhm.
And that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, they have a particular role and, job within the space. And then, we have other people kind of fill different holes. And so, we kind of account for that.
Mhm.
What we do at the tech fund is we'll usually have kind of an external consultant who will come in a day a week as an operator, basically to help put companies together.
Right. Okay.
So one of my spin outs I just did called Bloomsbury Genetic Therapies. Adrian Lamont, who is the former chief business officer at Orchard Therapeutics, he was doing one day a week, kind of helped work with the academic founders, put the plan together.
Yeah, I see.
Company came together, he quit and became CEO. And so, that was great because, he's a really fantastic leader and was, day one in the role and kind of building the management team. And so, yeah, so these spin out companies will have management teams kind of put in place quite early. And, someone like myself will take a board position, will
Right.
step back from any sort of company ops, and then the founders will be the role of founders. And that will change over time too, because, some of the programs are quite heavily reliant on the founders and some of
Of
them
course,
not
yeah.
so much. And that'll change. And, some of the founders will also change how they want to interact with the company too.
Yes.
Like I was saying a minute ago, some people, want to join as a role within the company or try it out. And that's something to explore too. So there's a lot of different ways that things can shape and form. But I think, on the other side, and then this is getting to the experience of me. Previously, I spun a company out from my PhD with another academic and two other people. And I mean, it is a learning curve, especially
Yes.
when, I kind of went from this, like, okay, just doing a PhD, this sounds good. Let's put it into a company. Great. How does
Yeah.
this work? And it's a tough journey. There's a lot of learnings there. And I think, it sounds like anything else. Like when people tell their journey, they kind of tell, oh, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, and then everything worked out great. But
Right.
it is a learning curve. And there's a few things I think that are really big misconceptions in this. One being it's not a linear journey.
No.
There are really good days. There are really bad days. There are things that work out. There are things that don't work out. And, I think that sometimes academic founders who have never done this before, excuse me, are really surprised about that of like, oh, wow, okay, there's like so much happening and is this normal? And yes, it is.
Yeah.
The other thing is that setting up a company and putting entities together always takes longer than you think.
Absolutely.
So whatever time you think it's going to be, double it because, license negotiations, legals, some of these kind of chunky bits that need to be worked out before the company can actually form, there's just a lot of things that you can't control for. And as quickly as you can respond to like lawyers' emails, there's other parties that might not be as quick. There might be things that need meetings. There might be things that need other documents to be done in the meantime,
Yes.
or edits to be done. So there is just a lot of variability there. So I think account for that. One, with your time, with your money, with your expectations, and also it's the company that you might think you're starting at the beginning is not the company you might come out with.
Right.
Things
Yes,
might get reshuffled. And so I think managing your own expectations of, okay, this is my heart and soul project I've worked on for 10 years. This is the best thing anyone has ever seen. It's going to change the world. This is amazing. It takes longer, and these programs might be shuffled around at the end,
Right.
and some things might get deprioritized, or spun out in a different way than you thought. So I think, you know, I think just to manage everyone's own expectations, basically, of what they're expecting, I think is always kind of a good thing to flag.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's good advice. Well, let's talk about your journey a little bit, Leigh. You've touched on it there, and I think that's a nice nice transition for us. So, there's always one question I ask before we get into the detail of it. For you,
Yeah.
why science? Why this career? Why this path for you originally?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you would ask me that 10, 15 years ago, I definitely would not have said, maybe 20 years ago, I'm kind of dating myself, but, you know, what I want to do with my life. And I still don't, right? Um, I think it started for me just as a curiosity that
Mm.
this was something really interesting. And I remember like moments taking like organic chemistry classes in university, and then all of a sudden being like, oh my God, this is how life works.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't really understand. Um, and yeah, I think it was just the fascination of it. You know, this is the most complex thing, and everyone is just walking around normally, not realizing how many little things are happening inside of them to keep us all doing that. You know, and
Yeah.
I think it just amazed me. And you know, the other thing that amazed me as well is that we get bodies function, you know, healthy, normal, quote unquote normal. I'm doing air quotes here. But then people get sick for things
Hmm.
that the body does to itself that for reasons we just don't know. You know, things like cancer. While of course there's external factors that
Right.
influence that, and people are predisposed, but it's something that the cells just normally do.
Hmm.
And I think things like this just amaze me. And, you know, I think if there's one thing to study and focus your time on, you know, it's, you know, looking at the most complex system and trying to figure out solutions for that, I think
Yes.
was just the best interest and the best way I wanted to spend my time.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, that was it. I think if there's no, it just, yeah, I mean, every day I learn something new, and I just think there's something so exciting about that.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I kind of continue learning every day. So I think
Mm.
for me, science has just been something that's been so great, and how that pairs with other things like, you know, the economics of things, or the finance, or the business, and how
Right.
it sits in every kind of sector across the space. I think is just, you know, goes to show how, you know, how many different ways you can think about a particular subject,
Yes.
um, in space. So
Yeah. Makes
yeah, I
sense.
think
So you embarked on this learning journey, learning more about science, following your interest in it, and you found your way to London. So tell us a bit about
I
that. Tell us
did.
a bit about that experience.
Yeah, so I did undergrad in biochemistry and
Hmm.
went to work at a lab working in RNAi. So I was at the Broad Institute in the RNAi consortium, and got really interested in gene modulation,
Right.
and how do you look at genes and knocking them down and studying the system. And so I got really interested in how you could apply that as a therapeutic.
Hmm.
So I thought, you know, who's doing this differently? Um, and found a group that we were kind of speaking with at Imperial College here that was using lipid-based nanoparticles to encapsulate mRNA,
Right.
which is another kind of RNAi system.
Hmm.
And they were, yeah, developing nanoparticles for these different funds to collaborate and encapsulating other kind of entities. And I thought it was really interesting. So I came and did my PhD there.
Hmm.
And then the PhD went well, patented, had some patents, had some
Yes.
papers. Really enjoyed my time, loved London. Um, and then one of the chemistry professors was like, I'm going to close my group and spin out a company around this, you know,
Hmm.
around particles and encapsulation methods. And, you know, do you want to join? We're going to take your tech and put it in. Do you want to join? So I said, yeah, I don't have a job.
Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
great. I think spinning out a company sounds like a, you know, really interesting idea, something I
Hmm.
hadn't done before. And I thought, you know, these kind of particles were just going to change the world as like a, you
Yes.
know, mRNA encapsulated nanotech. I mean, this is how to get these systems out.
Hmm.
Um, so we went out and tried to raise money, and nobody cared.
Okay.
Nobody wanted to put money in. We put a little bit of money behind it. And this was in 2012, 2011. So it was just, obviously well before the time of the
Yes,
COVID
of course.
vaccines. But the field was in a really different place there. And
Mm.
I remember giving a pitch to a fund in San Francisco, and I'm talking about mRNA delivery and lipid-based nanoparticles and how this is super cool and they should invest. And he asked me, he goes, "What's the VC? What's smaller than a nanoparticle?" And I kind of paused because it's really small. I don't know where you're going with this. And he said, "The VC interest in nanotechnology."
Oh,
And I was like, "Okay, thank you for
right.
that."
That is
Um,
brutal.
so brutal. But well, I guess he wasn't the betting horse for the COVID vaccine, but that's
Sure.
fine.
Yes.
So so after that, I was like, okay, nobody's putting money into this. This is not something that
Mm.
people have an interest in. So kind of wound that company down. Um, and then that was around the same time that CRISPR was kind of coming online.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, the first kind of couple papers had come out about the year before, and this company had just formed, called Desktop Genetics, and I met one
Yeah.
of the founders who was trying to hire people. Um, and I thought this is a really cool opportunity because
Yeah.
CRISPR is, a technology that has so much potential, and it was really at the early stages of it.
Mm. And I
So
guess
I
some
so
very
I
close
joined.
technical parallels as well to what you were doing previously.
I mean, it's from my old group, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was like perfect with that. And so, the vector that, was in one of the first papers was one of the vectors I engineered,
Ah.
5 years
Okay.
before
Right.
that. So I was like, oh, I know the system very well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, this is a great kind of segue for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I joined Desktop Genetics. I was there for about 5 years. I was chief scientific officer of the company. So did everything. I mean, from oh God, buying office furniture to like marketing to
Yes.
like helping with, obviously everything science, like the entire kind of product strategy, giving talks in any sort of corner of the world that was happening with CRISPR to helping with raising investment rounds,
Mm-hmm.
kind of everything that comes with management roles, sitting on the board. And then all the way through to brokering the acquisition, which was
Right.
4 or 5 years later. So I think that journey was really just instrumental in how to understand how a company gets started, works, what doesn't work, and
Mm-hmm.
exits. And I think just before that, I had done an internship at Index Ventures, which
Okay.
is now Medici. This is before they spun out to Medici.
Right. I see.
Um,
Yes.
and Francesco de Robertis, we, he gave me some really great advice at one point. He was like, I think until you work at a company, you can't get your hands dirty. You really don't know how they function,
Yeah.
and you don't know what drives them.
Yeah.
And he was spot on because I kind of spent some time in the weeds and was like, okay, this is how it drives it, and how bringing hitting home one of the points we were mentioning earlier of the importance of founders of
Mm-hmm.
companies, and the instrumental kind of backbone of companies that founders play, and the different dynamic of what drives all of them.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, they were all first time founders, and so there is a learning curve there,
Yeah. Of course.
and the different point from the UCL Tech Fund and in Desktop Genetics, let's say, is that the academic founders in most of the UCL Tech Fund companies don't work on the operation side full time.
Right. Okay.
Um, they're not leading the company. They're not also CEO. Some
Mm-hmm.
of them, of course, there are outliers,
Yes.
fantastic outliers that do. But in Desktop Genetics case, the founders were the C-suite team.
Yeah.
So they live and breathe this. And you learn really how founders think about things,
Mm-hmm.
what drives them. And I think, how to kind of leverage their best skill sets, but also
Right.
remind them that they need to hire the, all their better skill sets around them and kind of bring, what kind of team does this need to look like?
Mm-hmm.
What holes are there and how this company needs to grow, and also kind of go through that journey with them too, which was something really kind of powerful because you think, okay, some people are really good leaders at certain stages of certain companies, and then some are
Yes.
not.
Yeah.
where do companies outgrow founders? And what does that look like? And how can you kind of support the team so that everyone comes along this journey together and comes out
Mm.
on the other end together, which doesn't always happen.
No.
So I think kind of going through that process, was really a great learning curve for
Yeah,
me in
absolutely.
that case. Of even though I had done it before, it wasn't kind of the full experience. Um,
Yeah.
and so I kind of was a founder in one company and then working with founders in another company. And
No,
so kind of
absolutely.
got like the 360 view on that.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point because I think, you if you found a company, well, obviously 2 points really. I suppose, as you said, running a company is very different from sitting on the board of a company, right? When you're in there every day and
Hmm.
you feel
Oh, yeah.
everything that happens, and it's a much more visceral and emotional experience than it is for anybody else, right? Um, but also, you touched on earlier the sort of the founders being in the right role in the or playing the right role in the company, and I think there's
Hmm.
sometimes often I guess down to ego as much as anything else. There's sometimes an assumption that they should be the CEO, where in reality they hate that job. It's not the job that they want to do, and there are exceptions, as you say, but um, it can be a
Yeah.
pretty thankless task being the CEO of a company.
Look, yeah, I mean, no question. And, we're all human. And so
Mm,
at the end of the day, everyone will wake up and be like, okay, is this still for me? Is this what I want to
yeah, yeah,
do? Do I still
absolutely.
want this job? And, I think every founder probably asks themselves that,
Mm,
like, okay, is this right for me? And, at some point, founders step down and they do
yeah.
different roles. And, that is, there's a need for them too. They are instrumental to the company, but you know, in some cases, it's better for everyone for somebody else to come in as CEO and kind of take
Mhm.
that role on or take the company to the next stage.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, some companies go through that, some don't. But that's definitely something that those are some tough conversations that, and just tough mental exercises to go through because
Mm,
this is something that they've spent their entire life thinking about or living you know, 7 days a week, 24
yeah,
hours a day.
absolutely.
And giving that
Absolutely.
up is really tough.
It is,
So
I
yeah, I
think.
mean, it's not easy. Yeah, it's not easy, but this is the way companies grow and change.
Mm,
Things evolve. And I think the best founders know that and know when is the right time to kind of do this and welcome usually the board who will have this conversation with them, welcome that. And what is in the best interest of the company, versus you. And you're right, sometimes ego or emotion, and
yeah,
that's we're all human, right? That's normal.
of
um
course.
but
Yeah.
ask yourself, like, what's the best role for me in this company? What's best for the company? What do I want to do? Like, what do I want to wake up and do with my life? So
Yeah, absolutely. I always think of it as most people wouldn't take it very well if someone knocked on their door and told them that someone else should bring up their children from now on. It's that kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so at that point then I guess so you'd been in and around venture and investment for some time at that point, whether as someone receiving venture capital or in your
Mhm.
internship, and you kind of knew how that world operated. What was it that led to you taking the plunge and stepping into it full time and taking on this role that you're doing now?
Yeah. So after the acquisition of Desktop Genetics, I left and I went to go work at Quell
Hmm.
Therapeutics, which is a cell therapy company looking at regulatory T cells for immune response. And so I was there for about a year building up the platform strategy. Um, and it was kind of there that I was starting to question, is company ops what I want to do
Right.
still? And I was just, I think after like the long haul of Desktop Genetics, I was kind of like in a different place, but still
Yeah, I can
feeling
see
like,
that.
okay, I'm a little kind of tired of starting over again from this. And I mean, it was a great company and a great kind of opportunity. But I kind of, I think a few months in was like, okay, I'm gonna think about, I think I want to go into venture again because, I really liked working at my internship at Index, and I kind of thought VC would be an interesting kind of position for me.
Yes.
So at that point, fast forward 6 years, I thought, okay, I've got a good amount of experience now. Maybe this is a good time to try to see if they were hiring for this role. And I thought it sounded really interesting. And I think staying close to the science in the early stage was really appealing to me. So it kind of had all the right components I was looking for. Met the team who are great, and so I was like, okay, sign me up. I'm ready to switch sides.
Fantastic. We've covered quite a lot of ground here, and so we probably talked about this already. But if you were looking back on your time so far, then Leigh, and on your career to date, and I suppose if you were talking to yourself back at the point perhaps that you were finishing your PhD, or back at the point that you were starting out, what do you think are the things that you would offer as advice? What sorts of things do you think have been the most important things that you've learned through your career so far? And we may have touched on some of them already.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a great question. I think, retrospectively, probably would have given myself a lot of different advice. But I think the key things that I kind of followed and I think stuck, and I think I agree with it to this day. I did not want a job where it was kind of just, I didn't want to be like a little cog in a really big wheel and have like a very kind of safe, easy job. Like that just wasn't really for me.
Yes.
And I wanted something that was just a little more, had a little more, I guess, risk when I was younger, and I exposed myself in a few different ways in the sense of, just to try things that might not work. And I think failing is okay because you learn a lot from it. So take chances, be okay to take chances. And also kind of just, you have to really want to wake up and do this. And, as long as you're enjoying what you do, it's not work because it's
true.
It kind of keeps going. And so I think to make sure you don't get to the point where you're too stressed, but at the same time, like kind of check in with yourself to make sure like the level you're operating at works for you.
Yes.
So I think those are kind of some very high level, vague key pieces of advice that I would kind of stuck by, and would also advise my younger self of and have fun, with this.
Absolutely.
So.
And I think it's really important stuff. I think and they all link together, right? I think if you are developing and you're learning and you're doing things that you're interested in, you're probably going to be having more fun. You're probably going to be enjoying yourself, and if you're enjoying yourself, you're probably going to be learning more. It's all cyclical, right? And if you can just make sure you're in the right place, those things hopefully start to look after themselves as long as you keep an eye on them. So fantastic. Leigh, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tom. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks very much for listening. Careers in Discovery is sponsored by Singular, helping you to build a brilliant biotech company. Biotech leaders spend far too much time, money, and energy on hiring and people issues. Head to www.singular-biotech.com to learn how you can recruit and engage your team more effectively so you can focus on developing medicines, treating patients, and saving lives.